a lot of focus in Israel, but across the world, is on the Bibas children. And I think they've become an image of the innocence of all of the hostages. And I think correctly so. The idea that you can take babies hostages, let alone the children who were murdered on October 7th, says everything about Hamas. And I think the fact that Hamas is still seen as anything other than bloodthirsty evil terrorists says a lot about the world. With Hamas right now, they're not releasing who is alive and who is dead, but they've said that at least 8 of, I think, the 26 remaining hostages to be released are dead. Do you think that, God forbid, if these children and the family has been killed, which unfortunately they probably have at this point, do you think that will change the view towards the emotional view of we must get the hostages out at any cost? Do you think that will change the view there? Or do you think the idea that we just must get the hostages out will remain? I know it's a difficult question, but I think my problem with a lot of these things is that is the root of the whole idea of taking hostages, right? Is that if you can do that and still play ball, then I think it leaves you open to further victimization, that if we don't actually address the reality of the situation, we're doing a disservice to our future selves. So where do you think this is going if worst comes to worst, we do hear this horrific news?
So as a matter of Jewish law, until I have verifiable proof that a Jew has been killed, I assume that Jew is alive. It is my fervent prayer and hope that the Bibas children will be returned to us. But yes, the Bibas children don't only point out that kidnapping them was an evil act with no justification, but Shlomo Mansour was an evil act with no justification. Emily Demiri, who the first time your nation's press ever mentioned her was when she was freed. The British press ignored when a British citizen was being held for over a year. Only when she was freed, they're like, oh, by the way, look at that, she's British. Oh, who could have seen that coming? So they very much represented the innocence of all the hostages. But, number one, the desire for families, for the hostages to come home doesn't change based on logic or logistics. So if you have Father A and Father A's daughter is being held right now, the fact that another hostage was killed doesn't change his overwhelming need to embrace his daughter, to bring her home at any cost. So for him, the perspective doesn't change. For a lot of the political people behind the Bring Them Home movement, I'll be a little callous here, it's not about the hostages for them. It's bringing down the current government, which is something they have pledged their lives to for the last 15 years. So regardless of how many hostages come home, regardless if each and every one of the hostages came home tomorrow, you hear, Ken Son may be God's will, they would still be demanding that the government is evil and the government needs to do whatever. And as for the government and the Western world, I make no assumptions that these children's lives are not 100% healthy. But what would 2 more babies change that throwing babies in ovens on October 7th didn't change? That beheading a child on October 7th didn't change? That murdering kids on the beach didn't change? What could possibly 2 more deaths change? Because you knew these kids beforehand? I feel like I know these 2 kids. I have pictures of them in my home. But from America's perspective, from the Israeli government's perspective, what would this change? You know who these people are. You know they worship death and evil. You know there is no good in their ideology. You know their entire desire for statehood, as they have openly said, is to murder Jews, all Jews. When Kfir Bibas was born in a little Israeli town, Hamas already wanted to murder him. When Ariel Bibas was born, when Yarden Bibas was born, 36 years ago, they wanted to murder him. From the very birth of a Jew, he is on their list. As Nasrallah, may he rot in whatever place God deigns to put him. Do you know that when Nasrallah died, he died choking on his own acids under a pile of rocks? He didn't die in the bombing. He died in agony, covered in stones, looking at his daughter's dead body, which brings me a little bit of solace, but not enough. I just like saying that out loud. And Nasrallah said he wants every Jew in the world to move to Israel so he can kill them all in one place. He's talking about my kids. He's talking about your parents. He's talking about everyone. So unfortunately, if so, I will not give a for instance with these children. But if a family called the Cohens were kidnapped and the entire family was annihilated by Hamas, I don't think it would change politics a single bit, unfortunately, because this isn't based in logic and isn't based in morals. It's capitulation to evil, and the arguments for capitulation, the arguments for it is easier, it is more politically expedient to end this. I want to have a one-line throwaway in my first speech that said I brought peace, so I'm willing to force you to capitulate in any way possible, doesn't change with the murder of 2 or 3 more people, unfortunately.